Okay. Okay, so that in the world, we've got a large number of intending parents who registered, over 60 couples and singles from around the globe for this today. There's a lot of interest in surrogacy in Canada and egg donation in that part of the world, and we're really lucky to have um, some terrific sponsors. We've got Create IVF from Toronto, Hope Springs Fertility Law Firm, who are bringing this to you today. And we've got a number of great speakers, not only Dr. Clifford LeBruck and Cindy Wasser, but also surrogates, egg donors, parents, psychologists, all talking to you about the different aspects of surrogacy in Canada. It's been an amazing destination for many people over a number of years now, given the favourable laws in that country. And we're going to dive deep in this webinar today about how that all works with a number of different sessions. There's a Q&A box down the bottom. You can put questions in if you'd like to along the way, and I'll try and type answers to them if we get time. Or the speakers might after they've done their sessions. I'm first going to introduce you to Scott Swanberg from Egg Helpers, who's also with CFC, Canadian Fertility Consulting, and then his colleague Kelsey Wells. Scott's going to talk a little bit about the egg donor process in Canada briefly. Then Kelsey is going to talk a bit more in depth about it, given Kelsey's actually been an egg donor herself. And what we want to do with these sessions is really try and make sure you get the knowledge from the people who really know about it, people who've done this kind of stuff. So let me just share a screen with you, and we'll pull up Scott Swanberg's presentation. I've known Scott for many years, and we're really lucky to have him here. I'm just going to find the screen here. Okay, right. Let's have a look at this. So Scott's going to talk just really briefly about the program there before we come to Kelsey.
Hi everyone, my name is Scott Swanberg, and I'm the CEO of Egg Helpers. We're a Canadian-based company with more than 15 years of experience working with egg donors and matchmaking parents from around the world. Today, very excited to share with you a little bit more about who we are. We are so blessed to have wonderful young women who are committed to helping build your family. Our database is extremely diverse. We have young women from all different backgrounds willing to donate for you in either a known or an anonymous donation. It's your choice. These women are screened and vetted prior to going live in the database. When you do select someone, they can start the process straight away. The legal process in Canada, it's very simple and transparent. Once we find the perfect donor for you, we will then send you a digital agreement to sign. Once we get that back, we would then send that into the donor, and she would sign her consent to your timeline, whether you want to have a known or anonymous donation. It's your choice, and which clinic you're working with, and your timeline. Once we get that back from her, we would then take your information and hers, transpose it into a clinic match sheet, and have her attend her first new patient appointment. Once she's medically cleared, we would then send out the legal referral to your lawyer, who we are happy to connect you with several. Once that legal referral goes out, your lawyer will create a contract for you that really speaks to whatever that journey looks like in your mind's eye. The donation process. Prior to going live in our database, all of our donors are screened and vetted. they've had their health check, fertility check, psychosocial assessment completed. So when you do want to secure a donor, she can begin the process for you immediately. Typically, it's 30 to 90 days on average to have your eggs retrieved, your embryos created. I am very excited for the next steps in your journey. If you have any questions, please visit us at egghelpers.com. One of our case specialists will be in touch with you straight away. Thank you again.
Okay, so I'm now going to bring in Kelsey Wells, who's been an egg donor herself with this program, to talk a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of egg donation, because I know there's people already asking me questions about this on the webinar now. So, Kelsey, can you just put your video on? I know you're also involved in the surrogacy program with CFC, which is great.
It says that you cannot start your video because the host has stopped it. I can try.
Sorry, let me see if I can get that going for you. Here we go. Okay, that's great.
Start my video. There we go. Good morning, everyone.
Terrific. So take it away.
So I am Kelsey Wells. I'm also the travel coordinator for Canadian Fertility Consultants, and I work in conjunction with Egg Helpers, and that's my current employment is how I became this job is from egg donation. So it's kind of funny how I'm here now. I am a known egg donor to a beautiful couple in France who are now in the early stages of their surrogacy journey. The experience of being an egg donor has fulfilled my life in ways I thought was not possible. Essentially, you're giving the gift of life from the source. The donation process was really fast and efficient. They screened me and I went in, did what I needed to do. They gave me some amount of medications I took. Everything was quick and easy. I was in and out of there, and they made everything. They facilitated the process with all of their coordinators that they had. So from my journey, I was told that 31 eggs were retrieved, and 13 of those eggs were healthy eggs, and they made 13 viable embryos for the intended parents. And it was a very successful retrieval. And the intended parents now are, and it's just kind of funny how I'm in this field now working with the surrogacy aspect of it, because now I get to follow their journey with the baby that they're going to have. So it's all pretty cool. If there's any other questions you'd like to know about egg donation, I'd be more than happy to fill that in for you.
That's great. Thanks, Kelsey. Can you tell us, are people able to bring their own egg donors into the program if they've got a donor themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. They still have to go through all the screening process because they take all your blood work. They want to know if, there is something along your genes where it can affect the embryos or, the potential person. So they need to know, they screen you for examples like schizophrenia. They want to make sure that there's not going to be any, how can I say, they just want to make sure that there's not going to be any conflict of interests when it comes to creating embryos. So they make sure that you're heavily screened. There's no DNA abnormalities. So yeah.
Yep.
Other than that, you can, if for example, if my husband and I weren't able to conceive, if I didn't have enough viable embryos or eggs, so we could take them from my sister, for example, at least, we could keep that going within the family line, and then they can create embryos. And then if I can carry it, then that's an example.
Yeah, yeah. one more question's come in for you, Kelsey, about the timeline for the process. I think Scott said before that 90 days is a rough average for how long it might take to recruit an egg donor and do the egg retrieval. Is that right?
Yes, because from the get-go, you are needed to do, the background check, the screening, the tests. Then you have to do legal agreements. A psychological evaluation as well. So, there's a lot of tests at the beginning. And not only that, if you have an event or something you want to do, you really have to take a month and a half off to yourself, just to be sure that you're in a nice quiet and calm environment. You know what I mean? If you have a skiing trip, you're going to have to push that off for a little while, but
Yeah.
just to focus on your egg donation.
Yeah, yeah. And do you think this is something that you would do again? Would you donate eggs a second time yourself, do you think?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm very close with the family who I am a known egg donor with, and just to see the excitement and to be able to give these beautiful dads an opportunity to be parents has fulfilled my life in ways I never thought was possible. So I would absolutely do it again
Yeah.
to whoever needs it.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. And I think my understanding is you need to have a sort of a few months delay between egg retrievals. Is that right?
Pardon, can you repeat that?
You need to have a few months delay between each egg retrieval. You can't go straight into the next one, can you? Or do you need to?
No, they want a bit of a time frame just because your hormones are a little out of whack, because they do give you a certain type of hormones to give to yourself to be able. So essentially, I think I was taking three different medications, and you need your body to just acclimate from that, because it can be a lot if you're. It took me about, I would say, 2 to 3 months for my body to simmer down from everything, and then I felt normal again. But it is a little bit of a process building up to it. But yeah, I would agree. I'm not exactly sure of the time frame before you can donate again, but I know that I'm ready. I've been contemplating it, so I would definitely do it again.
Yeah, you're great. All right. Thanks so much for coming on. That's great. We're now going to turn to Dr. Clifford LeBruck, who's a bit of a legend in the IVF space in Canada. Dr. LeBruck has been running Create for many years now, and Create specialises in international patients particularly. They work with donors like Kelsey, with surrogates to make embryos. One of the most important things about the process for any of you going forward is making good quality embryos, as Dr. LeBruck's going to talk about now. He's going to really give us a bit of an understanding of how to make that happen. So, Dr. LeBruck, welcome. Thanks so much for coming on with us. It's great of you.
It's great to be here. Can you hear me?
Yep, that's wonderful.
Wonderful. Great. So I'm happy to answer any questions about this process. Very excited to be here.
That's great. Can you walk us through a little bit about the process of making sort of good quality embryos with a donor? I mean, what should people be looking out for when they're choosing a donor, for example?
So when we look at donors, they're just we do a whole series of assessment of donors. We really want to do a medical assessment to make sure that they're a good candidate to be a donor. So the things that we look for are a whole medical and family history to make sure they don't have any conditions in their family that might be passed on to a child that could affect the offspring for the intended parents. We do a full genetic assessment, as Kelsey was mentioning, where we look at the genes that they have and called carrier screening, and make sure that they don't have anything that might be passed on. We have to make sure that the intended parents, as well as the egg donor, don't have the same gene that they carry that might affect the child. We also do a full assessment of their blood work to make sure they don't have any infectious diseases. And we want to make sure that they have the right number of eggs that could be, so that they can be a good candidate to be an egg donor. And we do a test called, you'll probably hear about this when you go through the process, called anti-Müllerian hormone. It's one of the critical tests to make sure that they're a good candidate to be a donor, especially when we're looking at same-sex male couples, where we want to make sure we have embryos for each of them in many cases, that because many same-sex male couples want to have a child from each of the partners, and by having enough eggs, we're going to be able to create embryos for each of them. So that's a very important part of the process for many, many intended parents.
Right, right. What about sperm quality? I mean, how often is that an issue in guys, needing to do extra procedures like ICSI, for example, to inject the sperm? Is it important they get their sperm tested before they come to create?
Absolutely. So all intended parents, male intended parents, must provide a sperm sample or have it tested, and we have them tested locally before they come to Canada to provide a sperm sample, and that involves testing the number of sperm that they have, the number that are moving, which is called motility, and we also look at the morphology or the shape of the sperm. You can see sperm behind me; those are perfect sperm, but not all sperm have a normal shape to them, and that allows us to make sure that they have a very good sample in order to provide for the fertilization of the eggs. Now, at Create, we have special technologies to overcome some problems in sperm. So we can, in fact, we have a special technique to be able to select out sperm that are normal shaped out of all of the sperm that are provided. So that's a very important thing to look for. We also do a test called DNA fragmentation, which I won't have time to go into detail, but it's a qualitative test to look at the DNA inside the sperm to make sure there's a good percentage of sperm that have good, normal, healthy DNA.
Right. We've got a lot of parents from different countries here today, from Europe, from Australia. I have heard that some guys do ship their sperm to Create. Is that true? You can actually ship it there, you don't have to travel?
That's a great question. So yes, during COVID, when travel was so difficult, we actually developed a kit that we can send to intended parents to allow them to freeze their own sperm at home. We've created a video that makes it very easy to do, and they can freeze their own sperm at home and also have blood taken by somebody local that can then be shipped back to us. And that allows them to do it without having to come all the way here just to freeze their sperm. Of course, we want to make sure their sperm is normal or at least reasonable before it's shipped, so that we can make sure that we're going to have a good enough sample. For those that have very poor sperm samples, unfortunately, they do have to come because providing the sperm locally here would be better for those particular situations. But for most people, they can use the kit if they wish.
Okay, that's great. I've had a question come in about how recent should the sperm testing be before they're providing the sample? Is it within the last how many months?
We'd like to have within about 6 months to have a sample. It can be a little bit longer if it's quite normal, but 6 months we would like to see in order to make sure there's no change in the sperm before it's provided to us.
Right, right. Look, I know that Create offers some guarantee programs for people who want to ensure they have enough embryos. How do those guarantee programs work at Create?
Well, we're one of the few clinics in the world that has this. We have a guarantee of 1 baby, a guarantee of 2 babies, and we also have a guarantee 1+1, which was designed for same-sex male couples that want to have a baby for each of them. And what happens is we allow them to have up to 2 donors in this program. It's called a shared risk program. You pay a little bit extra to have this guarantee, and we will return your money minus a small administrative fee if you're not able to produce a baby, whatever you're looking for, 1 or 2 babies through this program. And I think it gives you a peace of mind. You're paying a certain amount of money, and you know that you'll have your family or you'll have money returned. The details, I don't have time to go through all of it. Our accounting people at our clinic are very well versed in how it all works and the financials, and they'll go through it very carefully with you to make sure you totally understand how it works. But I think it's a great program for many, many people around the world.
Right. So that program would sort of cover all your IVF costs for for the embryo creation, for the egg donor costs and the embryo creation and the transfer costs for the embryos.
That's correct. Up till the time you have your children. The things that are not covered by it are the legal costs and the costs for the agencies, the donor and the surrogacy costs. But the costs, all the medical costs are covered by those guarantee programs.
Yeah, that's great. All right. Look, there's a question that comes up. Some people always ask me, or should I do this PGTA testing of my embryos? If I'm using a young egg donor who's under 30, is PGTA testing sort of mandatory? Is it required, or what's your opinion on that?
Well, it is included in our guarantee program, so there's no extra cost because we feel it is an important thing to consider. Even in a young egg donor in their 20s or early 30s, the odds of having an abnormal embryo is about 30%. And that's just, we've done thousands and thousands of embryos at all age groups. And in that age group, that's what the numbers look like. And we have one of the top genetics labs in the world here at Create. I'm very proud to say. What it involves is looking at the number of chromosomes the embryo has. A normal person has 46 chromosomes. If there's 47 chromosomes, there's an extra one. That would be trisomy 21. If you have an extra chromosome 21, that would be trisomy 21 or Down syndrome. If there's 45 chromosomes, it's missing one. That could be a severely abnormal child or a miscarriage or just no pregnancy at all. And the other reason why, you want to obviously rule those things out, but if you're using a surrogate, of course, it's important that we want to reduce the burden to the surrogate. They're here to help you have a baby, not to go through, and they don't want to go through a failure or a miscarriage, which can take 3 months to discover, 3 months to recover from, 6 months of just wasted time that we can easily avoid, or an abnormal baby and having to decide together with the intended parents about what to do about that. So I think that doing genetic testing nowadays is so simple to do, so easy. It allows us to really put a normal, healthy embryo inside the uterus of the surrogate.
Yeah, no, that's great. For those people who don't understand the IVF process, I mean, we're getting an egg donor, and maybe you might retrieve on average perhaps 15 eggs. What would that end up having in terms of day 5 embryos on average, if she's a good egg donor?
So the average actually is a bit higher. For donors, it's about 16 to 30 eggs on average. And if you look at a same-sex male couple, which means about 8 to 15 eggs for each of them on average. And those are the donors that we want to have, of course, when there is 2 recipients. And then from that, we can expect somewhere between around 2 to 8 embryos for each person in the couple. That's usually enough to have at least 1 child for each of them, and even more if they want a big family. But of course, it is important to note that you may not have an equal number of embryos for each of the 2 people that are providing sperm in a same-sex male couple. And there's very rarely we would get no embryos for one of the 2 recipients. If that were to happen, we'd have to make more eggs for that other person, but that's pretty rare.
Yeah, okay. What about male clients who are HIV positive? What's the procedure for that kind of patient?
That's a great question. In our lab, we're able to do HIV positive, hepatitis B or C positive people that are providing gametes, their sperm or eggs, depending on the type of process they're going through. And with HIV positivity, we know that there's never been a case of transmission of HIV from an egg provider or sperm provider to a surrogate or baby in the world, because those gametes do not carry the virus. We do have to wash them and put them through a certain process to make sure, but we want to make sure they're undetectable levels with their antiviral medications. And we explain that to surrogates, and many surrogates are very happy to carry for a couple that has either both or one of them is HIV positive, because it is safe for everybody involved.
Okay, that's great to know. I've had another question come in about supplements. I mean, to help your sperm health, are there any particular supplements that guys should be taking if their sperm quality is a bit lower?
Yeah, there's some male supplements that are available. You can even get them online on I don't know wherever you are. Amazon is a very common thing that we use in North America. But basically, you can get some of them online. They're male supplements that have a lot of what are called antioxidants. These are common types of compounds involved in, say, in multivitamins and many types of vitamins. But there are specific ones that are really good for sperm, and these would be great to take if you do have a low sperm count. If your sperm count is normal, it's not necessary, but you could take one of these if you wish.
Yeah, okay, great. Another question's come in about whether it's better to make embryos in your home country or in Canada. Does that matter? I mean,
Well, that's an option. You can do it there, and we ship from all over the world. We actually have a team at Create Fertility Center in Toronto that it will enable anyone to ship from almost every country in the world. So that's not a problem at all. But we do always prefer to do it here because we do have the genetic testing, so it allows us to do it. In many countries, it's not allowed or very difficult to come by. So we can provide that genetic testing here, and I think doing it here just also we cannot do a guarantee program when the embryos are shipped from somewhere else, because we have to know that the quality of the embryos is to the level that we are able to achieve at Create here in Toronto. So it is preferred to have them done here, but we will definitely accept embryos from anywhere in the world. We don't have to, there's no FDA testing required on or Health Canada and Canada testing on embryos, so that's not an issue. You can ship from anywhere in the world and we can accept them, at least countries that it's allowed to do that. But we do have a preference, especially for a guarantee program, that the embryos are made here.
sure. No, that makes good sense, I think. Okay. Look, there's one more question's come in here. I'm just trying to work out what this person's talking about. It's with embryo quality. I mean, what's the chances every time you do an embryo transfer? What are the sort of success rates every time you do a transfer of embryos? Should people expect that the first transfer will work, or is it not always the case?
So it isn't always the case. If any clinic says they have 100% success, that's just not biologically possible. So if you have a normal genetically tested embryo, we call it euploid embryo. That means 46 chromosomes, as I mentioned before. Then we find that it's about 70% that you'll have a success on your first try, and about 70% on the second try. So if you do the math, 70% plus 70% of 30, you're just over 90% chance after 2 transfers that you'll be successful. So it is quite high, but there are cases where we have to go on and do a third or fourth transfer. But most of the time, people are pregnant within their first couple of tries.
Yeah, okay. That's great to know. All right, and look, I understand also. I think there's a program now where you're actually able to bring in donor eggs from other countries, even to supplement the Canadian egg donors. Is that correct? Has that been arranged
To bring donor eggs from another country?
Yes.
So we always do prefer fresh donation. That's the most successful, because eggs that have been frozen, you get only a certain number of eggs, and you're not getting a full number. But yes, you can ship eggs from another country as well if you wanted to do that from one of those egg banks. But you will have a bit of a lower success rate, and we don't include that in our guarantee program. We really prefer always fresh eggs if it's possible.
Yeah, okay. No, that makes sense to me. Fine. What sort of, in that first 12 weeks of a pregnancy, is it Create who's sort of doing the tests of the to check how the embryo is going in the first trimester? Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. During the pregnancy, we do a test early on at about 10 weeks gestation. It's about 8 weeks from the transfer time, called the non-invasive prenatal test. It's just a blood test that we take on the surrogate, so it doesn't affect your baby at all. And it tells you the number of chromosomes, so it confirms what we found out on the embryo itself. It will also tell us about other sort of more subtle abnormalities that we can't test on embryos, which are more rare, called microdeletions. They can cause severe brain and physical abnormalities, so we can test for that, and we can actually tell you whether you're having a boy or a girl.
Right. Wow. Okay. Interesting. But my understanding is, if we go back a step, that gender selection is not possible at the start, is it, for in Canada, like where I'm from in Australia?
That's right. So in Canada, like many countries in the world, gender selection is not allowed. We just want to make sure you have a healthy baby, whether it be a boy or a girl.
Yeah. That's great. What about, one question's come in? What about transferring 2 embryos at a time? Is that done much in your clinic, or not?
Yeah, very, very rarely would we do that. And the reason is because when you have a twin pregnancy, that's very high risk for your surrogate. And she's doing this to help you have a baby, not to put her life at risk. So, and she has children already, surrogate. We don't want to have any risk to that surrogate. That's not reasonable. In addition, you could have 2 children that are severely premature, that can have severe handicap long term in their life, in their brain, in their lungs, or even deaf or blind children. We want to have one healthy child at a time and then move on to have a second child. And I think it's important to note that your embryos, when they're frozen, the estimate is you can keep them up to 10,000 years. So it doesn't matter how long you wait after having a child. Those embryos are kept frozen until you want to use them, and there's no difference if you wait 1 year, 2 years, 8 years, or whatever. So those embryos can be kept until you want to have your second child.
Yeah, no, that's a really good reminder for people. I think you're right. Is they can just stay in storage, because they can stay for years, can't they? Quite happily frozen without any damage.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah. And the same for sperm, isn't it? You could send sperm over, but not even make the embryos for 6 months or so, and the sperm's not going to deteriorate being frozen, is it?
Yeah. Yeah, we keep sperm frozen for years and years, and it's just as good as when we froze it. So yes, if there's any delays in your process, that sperm is good really forever.
Yeah, right. Look, that's great. Thanks so much, Dr. LeBruck. That's wonderful. Great to have to talk to you as always. Looking forward to seeing you in Australia very soon. That's
Yeah.
wonderful. And we're now going to turn to some surrogates, and we're going to talk to hear from some Canadian surrogates about their experiences. These guys at Create are really good, because they get to work with surrogates and donors a lot. They're probably one of the largest providers globally in this kind of area. So they've been terrific in terms of finding some surrogates who've been happy to talk to us today. So I'm now going to get a pre-record. Some people weren't quite able to be as good as Dr. Bruck and get up so early. So Andrew and Libby are going to do a pre-record for us, talking a bit about their journeys with Create and working with parents around the world. So let me just pull that up for us now. I'm just going to see if I can find Andrew's video here. Here we go.
Hello everyone, my name is Olivia and I'm here to talk to you today about my journey as a surrogate and what it looks like from the surrogate side of this whole journey. So a little bit about me. Again, my name is Olivia. I live here in Ontario, Canada. I'm actually from Halifax, Nova Scotia. I am a military spouse and I have 2 young boys who are 7 and just about 4. So I was sent a number of questions in regard to surrogacy in a few different categories, one of them being decision making. So we'll just get straight into it. What initially encouraged your interest in becoming a surrogate? This one I do get quite often. So my main, what I call it, my why, is basically because of the fact that I myself am part of the queer community. I am pansexual. Mind you, I did fall in love with and marry a man. So we were able to build our family on our own. However, I do have a lot of friends within my community who were often saying that it was very hurtful for them to feel like they couldn't have children of their own genetics. And I know to some people that's not important, but when it's important to you, it's important, period. So I think it's not anyone's place to really say who can have babies and how to have them, frankly. So that's my why. Long of the long, short of the long, what have you. What concerns did you have prior? My only concern was an unsuccessful transfer. IVF is unpredictable. You can have great chances, but chances aren't outcomes. So that was one thing that really concerned me. That and maybe a little bit of the needles and how my body would react to the medication, but I handled it. It was fine. How did your husband and parents react? So, my husband is a very supportive person. We've been together for 15 years. Yes, 15 years. It's been a long time. And through that, we've gone through a lot. There's a lot of trust there. He knows me very well, and he knows that I would never go into something without doing a lot of research, asking a lot of questions. I actually was initially with another agency first, and that agency and I were not a good fit. And so I decided to end that. So, needless to say, I do a lot of work before I come to him with things. And because of that, he always knows that I'm not just going to dive into something without really knowing what's going to happen. The main thing with him was that he thought that I would be genetically related to the baby. And of course, being a gestational carrier, that's not the case. I had an embryo transferred that was a donor egg and one of the intended father's sperm. So, yeah, not related to me whatsoever. So, we're good there. Surrogate characteristics. I find this really interesting because there's so many variables, but one thing that is of the utmost importance is absolutely communication. If you can't keep someone in the loop of what's going on, I don't think that this is for you. On both sides, really, but like for the surrogate, you're carrying or potentially going to be carrying, you're hoping you're going to be carrying for this couple or this intended parent, something that is extremely important. Obviously, this is a life you're looking at. So you need to be able to communicate. You need to be adaptable for sure. Things change. Not everything goes to plan when it comes to surrogacy, science, and all those things around it. And you just need to be open, empathetic, and you also need to have a tough skin. I do say tough skin for the surrogates because some of the comments that I did receive weren't the most kind, but I just let it roll off my back. That's not a problem for me. One of the nicer ones would definitely be, I could never do that. When someone, especially a stranger, would hear that I was a surrogate, especially once I was very pregnant and showing. People would say congratulations, and I'd say, oh, I'm a surrogate, but thank you for the dads, basically. And then the next item would be, I could never do that. And I would always respond with, not everyone can, but for me, it's something that I can do and I want to do. So that usually just lets that go. Surrogate and IP matching. So this question here is, what did you look for in a prospective couple? Like I mentioned, my why is that I wanted to help the queer community. So for me, it was to match with a queer couple. That was definitely a very big one for me. Did you only want to carry for someone with no children? This is actually something that I didn't really think about off the bat. So thinking back now, I don't think that I would have an issue with them already having a child, but you do have that initial thought of, if they have a child, I really would like to help someone who does not have a child yet. But again, that wasn't something that was a non-negotiable for me. I didn't put that into my process of matching, basically, is what I want to say. So what about geographic location? This is a question I get quite a bit as well. To me, when I was initially matching, I wanted to have a couple that was Canadian, mainly because of travel. I didn't know how that was going to look. So that was my big reasoning for that. So these relationships can break down before or after transfer is the next part here that we're going to talk about. What would you recommend intended parents and potential surrogates consider to ensure they have the best chance of harmonious relations? Having the talk during the matching process between the IPs and the surrogate of the expectations after birth is extremely important. If you're not agreeing with that when it comes to the matching portion of your relationship, give or take, then I don't think you should go forward with it. You need to talk about things in regard to what your communication is going to look like after the baby is born. Also, you need to talk about what both expectations on both sides are going to be communication wise during the process, before transfer, after transfer, during the whole pregnancy. Are the IPs going to be there over the phone or in person for appointments? Those are all things that you want to talk about, because if you're not on the same page with things as fundamental as that, I don't think that the match is going to be as successful as both or one party might hope for it to be when they go back to look at the journey later on. So actually now we're going into surrogate and IP relationships. So what sort of relationship did you develop with the couples you cared for? So obviously I only cared for one couple, that couple in Toronto. So our relationship with them, and I say our because my husband as well as my children have definitely developed a relationship with the intended dads and now the little baby. So we have decided that we are obviously going to keep in contact. That was something that we wanted off the bat. We said it in our first match call, and it's just blossomed since then. Actually, I'll go on to the next question because it digs a bit more into what I want to say. So, what expectations of contact did you have with the children you carried for post birth? So, like I said, we all agreed that we would be staying in contact. We message multiple times a week. Sometimes more, sometimes less. It really depends. Life happens. We have a group chat of my husband, myself, and the IPs that we're always like sending pictures, just like talking about day to day stuff. They've really integrated into our lives, and I just don't see them not being in our lives. And we said it from the start. They said it that they wanted the surrogate to keep in contact with them and the baby afterward. And it was something that I really wanted as well. So we really agreed with that. No questions asked right from the beginning. And that's very important. If intended parents feel uncomfortable or unsure about having a close ongoing relationship with their surrogate, is this a problem? Absolutely. If one party doesn't want to communicate and the other party does, someone's going to be left out there. So if you're not agreeing about something as small as that, like I said, I don't think that it would be the right match for you. I know that, yes, the matching process can take a very long time, but that's the process. It's either you're a match or you're not. And communication is the most fundamental thing. So we know these relationships can break down before or after transfer. So the next question is, what would you recommend intended parents and potential surrogates consider to ensure they have the best chance of a harmonious relationship? It's being on the same page about the most fundamental things, and be that how you're going to communicate, how often you're going to communicate, if they're going to be included in the doctor appointments or midwife appointments, if you are going to be doing a hospital birth, a home birth, if you're going to have a midwife or a doctor, if vaccinations or vaccines are something that the person wants or doesn't want. Some parents even want the surrogate to be kosher potentially. So there's just a lot of things to consider, but I definitely think that having a long matching process is a really good thing to think about, because you can take more time to ask all those questions. And I know for us, we did a lot of talking and we had our match be a long process so that when we got to contracts, there were no There was no back and forth. It was very easy. We all knew what each other wanted, and that made for a very smooth contract, and it was perfect. So, surrogate and IP relationships. This is a big one. What sort of relationship did you develop with a couple you cared for? So, we hit it off like a house on fire. And also, actually, my husband was very involved as well, to the point that we have a group chat between the four of us. So we talk quite often, which is lovely. What expectations of contact did you have with the children you carried post birth? So, like I said, for me, something that was really important was to keep that communication going. So, we will keep talking. Absolutely. The IPs have completely blended with our family. My kids love them. And yeah, it'll just be easy. I have no doubts about that. It's just the way that we are. When we were doing our match call, I could just tell then they just seemed like people that I was already friends with. So it was just, like I said, very easy. If intended parents feel uncomfortable or unsure about having a close ongoing relationship with their surrogate, is this a problem? Absolutely. If the surrogate wants to stay in communication with them and the other people and the IPs don't want to stay in communication, someone's going to be left out, someone's going to be disappointed. And that's not what you want in this process at all. You want everything to be on the same page, and you really don't want conflict in your match. All right, so this next question is a very hot topic in the surrogacy world. It's asking, or saying rather, many critics worry that surrogates may be forced for financial reasons into caring against their will. What would you say to this? So, yes, many critics would have words to say about that, and it's something that I've experienced firsthand of people saying to me. So, I just want to start out by saying in Canada, surrogacy is altruistic. With that said, or what I should say, what that means is that everything is reimbursement based. And that reimbursement is based on eligible expenses that are negotiated within your contract. Um, every single expense that the surrogate incurs, they have to incur the expense to be reimbursed for it, is looked at. For me anyway, my agency has an accountant. She has to be basically conferring all expenses with the contracts and making sure that those are all perfect when she's sending out basically the reimbursements after she's done the calculations, and they have to be signed off on. There's a lot of work involved, but other than that, in the beginning of the process, to ensure that a surrogate is doing it on their own free will, there is a psychological testing that you have to go through. It's pretty rigorous. And I would say that if you could pull the wool over multiple doctors' eyes and get through this process still against your will, I would be shocked, very shocked, especially in Canada and the way that we run things in surrogacy here. So, yeah, like I said, there's a lot more I could say about that, but I can't speak on specifics about my contract because it's a legal document. So, long of the short, I just don't see how you could do it. You have to really want to do this. There's a lot of work involved. IVF transfers. Okay, so even with the best IVF success rates for third-party reproduction, still only average 1 in 3. Did you have transfers that didn't work or where you miscarried? We were fortunate enough that we didn't have any failed transfers or any miscarriages. Our first transfer just took, and we were off to the races with the rest of the pregnancy. Yeah, we didn't have any failed cycles or anything like that. It just kind of went smooth for us. So we were very lucky. Actually, this is the last section now. So, child surrogate bonding. What about the maternal bond that usually develops between a woman and the child she is carrying? Did you experience this bonding process during your surrogate pregnancy? If so, did it make giving up the child or children you carried difficult emotionally? Okay. So, not to sound like a cold person, but I am someone who it takes time for me to make those bonds. Even when my children were born, it did take time for me to bond with them. And that's not out of the norm. It's pretty typical for it to take a while to bond with your children. But with that said, I knew that that was something, a characteristic of me that was going to make the surrogacy process pretty easy for me because yes, I was bonded to the fact that I was carrying this baby that is moving and growing and all the things. My body's doing all the things to carry this baby, but I wasn't bonded to him in that way. Yes, I was concerned for his well being and all of that, but I wasn't bonded to him in that way, in a loving maternal way. But that's just me. This is just based on my experience. Now, I do want to say that with surrogacy, you're not giving up a child. In surrogacy, this child wasn't yours to begin with. It was created for the IPs with genetics that either are theirs or ones that have been donated, but you can't give up something that wasn't yours to begin with. And that's something that people really need to understand about surrogacy. This is surrogacy, it's not adoption. So it's two very different things. And no, it was not difficult at all to see the dads take the baby and have him in their arms. It was the most incredible and magical experience, and I'm very fortunate to have been able to be part of that. Sorry, but yeah, it there's no way to describe it truthfully, but no, it wasn't difficult to give back their baby to them now that he was out and ready to be earthside. Especially because I could like actually recover and sleep through the night. So being someone who has already had their children, I don't want your baby. I don't want to go through the newborn phase again. I don't want to do any of that stuff. And this isn't to scare anyone. It's just that I'm past that part in my life. I don't want to do those things anymore. I don't want to do the diapers anymore, none of that stuff, especially now that our youngest is finally like fully potty trained. I don't ever want to go back. But no, this wasn't giving up a child. It was giving a child back. So that's very important to say. So with all that said, those are all the questions that were provided for me. There's so much more that I could say. Surrogacy is a fantastic world. It's a magical world. It's bringing families together. It's creating families. It's growing families. So it's very exciting. And I wish all of you the best of luck in your journeys, whether you decide to go the surrogacy route or not. But I do want to say a special thank you to Create. Thank you so much for everything that you did for us. It will never be forgotten. Thank you.
All right, I think that was really terrific to hear from Olivia. Yeah, we haven't had as good a session like that for a while. So look, a question came in about what age do the surrogates tend to be. I think I'll get Cindy Wasser to answer that question because Cindy's the next speaker. For those of you who don't know Cindy, she runs Hope Springs Fertility Law in Toronto, and she's one of the legal leaders in surrogacy in Canada. She's done a lot of work in advocating for the rights of intending parents from around the world. So we're really lucky to have her today. She's going to talk to us about the laws in Canada and how they would work for you as foreigners engaging in this country. And so Cindy, welcome. Thanks so much for coming in. That's great. I'll just put you on the spotlight here. That's great. Thank you so much. Oh,
thank you. Can everyone, can you hear me all right?
Yeah, that's great. I should have mentioned also that Cindy's a mum via surrogacy as well.
Yes, and given that it's just about 7 a.m. here in Toronto, they're sleeping. Otherwise, I'd show them off. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, and thank you to everybody who's attended. I have to complain, Sam. do not ever put me on after a surrogate like that. I mean, and donor, like I've had to fix my makeup 3 times already for crying. And what a phenomenal speaker. I'm almost thinking I'd like to defrost another embryo, Dr. Lee Brack, and see if I can do it again. Yeah, hard act to follow with the boring law. So, and I say the law in Canada is really, really boring, and that is boring for me, but that is fantastic for all of you. Simple, boring is good for you. Nothing to argue about, nothing to fight. It's just so great. It's almost too good to be true. And that is because Canada has a value system of being truly a just society penned by our former Prime Minister, Pierre Trudeau. And that means anyone can have a baby in Canada. We don't have rules about gender, sexual orientation, religious issues, nothing. There isn't even a legal requirement for a medical need for surrogacy. The only thing is an age requirement. You have to be an adult, which is 18. So for donors and recipients, you must be 18. For surrogates, you must be at least 21 years of age. And the federal legislation in Canada also states that one cannot pay a donor or surrogate for any type of compensation or gift. So that means we have what's called an altruistic program in Canada, which means our donors and surrogates are doing this from their heart. They do get reimbursement for any expense they have. Absolutely. They should never be out of pocket, but they do not do this for money. It is not commercial. So we also have an incredibly good healthcare program in Canada called Universal Healthcare, which means any resident, that means living in Canada, not based on citizenship, but based on living, will have healthcare provided to them through their provincial government. So here in Ontario, we have Ontario Healthcare, for example. So your donor and surrogate gets all of her healthcare taken care of. Of course, the private clinic healthcare is something you pay for, but the surrogate's monthly checkups with her doctor, the OB midwife, and the weekly ones near the end, and the birth are all covered, for example, or any complications with the fetus are covered by her healthcare. You will be responsible to pay the hospital bill for your baby only. And if you do not have healthcare in Canada, and if you're not resident, you won't. So we do ask that international parents obtain a newborn health insurance policy that will cover the newborn in case there is any kind of catastrophic problem, which some have had. So it's very important that you not become a burden on our healthcare system. So those are some extraneous legal issues. But I think the most important legal issue for any international parent is, hey, Mark, see you there. Nice to see you again. So the most important element for any international parent, I think, is how do I become a parent? So I'd like to address the birth registration process as the most critical for you on this video, on this webinar. So birth registration comes under the purview of provincial law. Each province and territory in Canada will have some form of a family law act and vital statistics act that says we must register every birth in that province. And traditionally, it would be the woman who gave birth, from whose body the baby came, and the awful word they use is expelled. So she would be the woman who would register the birth. And when the science and the law developed around ART and surrogacy, we had to change that. So there was always a law available that enabled anyone with an interest in a child to apply to the court for what's called a declaration that they are the parent and someone else is not. And the judge always looks for evidence. Why should I declare you to be the parent? And of course, when DNA happened, it was really simple. But it's not always required that there be a genetic connection. So parentage in Canada is based on intention. So the evidence we would bring to the judge in a surrogacy case using the declaration process would include a letter from the clinic saying, I'm the doctor, I made these embryos using the sperm and eggs of whomever and transferred one of them to the surrogate. Affidavit evidence from the parents and the surrogate saying I had legal assistance with this. We have a signed contract. We're supposed to be the parents. The surrogate's affidavit saying I did this for them. We filed the contract. And in some cases, a certificate from a lawyer in some provinces is needed saying I gave independent legal advice. And the judge looks at that and says, that's an abundance of evidence. You're the parents, the surrogate is not. And then the next step is to send all that information to the government office, which we call the registry office. And we ask them to register the birth on the basis of what the judge has said. And then the third step is, please give us a birth certificate, evidence of the registration, that piece of paper. So that is a process that occurs consistently across the country. And what is different is the type of questions that may be asked or the length of time it may take to get that. But at the shortest time level, 2 weeks, the longest may be 6 weeks. And the 6-week one is Nova Scotia. But you could go home much earlier than that with the original birth certificate because they create one with the surrogate's name. And then we'd send you the new one later. So you don't have to stay in Canada more than 3-4 weeks max. So that was the state of law when I had my first daughter, Etta, 14 years ago. And I kind of hit the roof thinking, we shouldn't have to go through more hurdles as intended parents than we already have just to get here. We shouldn't have to pay more money. So I protested nicely by lobbying. And in Ontario, British Columbia, and now Prince Edward Island, we have an administrative process. If you do not need a court order, such as those in the UK, you can register the birth all by paperwork, which still you'd want the lawyer to help you with. So our office prepares all the documentation. We're just skipping the court order. We're going directly to the registry office. Surrogate signs a document saying, yes, I did this. I had a contract. I had a lawyer. They're the parents. You sign the same and a few other documents requesting the birth certificate, and the birth certificate is issued. With my office, that process takes 2.5 weeks. The next day you go to the passport office with your birth certificate and you can go home. Most of my clients are able to go home comfortably between 14 and 16 days post-birth. And so it's really, really, really simple. There is never an issue of parentage. The only thing that might go wrong, I think, is if a lawyer mistakenly filed the wrong names, and then it would just be fixed. And that certainly doesn't happen in my office. The passport process is really simple. So I'm going to talk about that now, which is really a question about citizenship. And someone just asked that question, so that's great. So everybody born in Canada is automatically Canadian. It just happens by birth, whether it's on land, on sea, or in the air, if it's Canadian territory. It does not matter who the parents are. The baby is Canadian. Every Canadian citizen is entitled to a Canadian passport, which is a lovely document. It is bilingual and it has beautiful pictures of our history, so you can read it. So who can apply for a newborn's passport? Only the parents. So you have to go through the process I just explained to establish that you are the parents. You take your birth certificate to the passport office. Again, not every lawyer in Canada will help you with the passport process, but our office does. We have seen intended parents misname their child in the passport application. So that happened years ago, and I said never again. Once is enough, and so we do it all. We fill it all out. You get the pictures done, which is the hardest thing, and then you go to the passport office with your birth certificate, application, the baby, and the photos. And you tell them when you're going home, you bring a hard copy of your plane ticket that shows the baby's going with you, and they will have the passport ready for you. your child will go home on a Canadian passport as a visitor. And that is because ours is the fastest passport to get. If you waited here for your British passport, for example, if you're in the UK, you might be here for 3 to 6 months. And, you know, you might want to do that, but you'll need a visa to stay. So you go home and you do, in the UK, you have to do an entire new declaration of parentage, court application in person at the Royal Courts of Justice in London. And then you establish your parentage there, for example, and you can get your British passport. In Europe, and so because in the UK, I just want to go back for a second, they do not recognize our legal parentage process. You can do the administrative process, just get the birth certificate, passport, and go home, and then you're going to go through that legal process there. In other countries, they do accept it, so it's not a problem. In some countries, like France, for example, they will accept and acknowledge a Canadian court order. So we're going to do the court order process for you, and your French lawyer is going to have that acknowledged in a process called an exequatur. And all the documents can be in French. I also speak French, so my office prepares that and we speak with you in French. And it'll be very easy because the transcription is all done in French. And we have local government offices that stamp the government documents. That's known in Europe as an apostille. We call it authentication. So we do most of it here. We facilitate it in conjunction with your European lawyer. We have clients from Germany that you're going to hear from shortly, in the UK. They're all on the panel. We have Irish clients on this panel who will explain how easy it was for them to get home. But you must do the process back home because your Canadian baby is a visitor and only allowed to stay as long as a visitor can. But it's pretty easy and no one ever has a problem doing it. As long as you have a local lawyer that we can work with, so you make sure that everything runs smoothly for you. If you choose not to hire a local lawyer, then, you know, some people do it themselves, but we're always worried about making sure you do everything correctly. So be very careful about that and learn from each other. I'm just going to check, Sam, if there's any other questions for me.
There was one about it's legal considerations if the IPs are Canadian but not living in Canada, they're living in the UK. Is it easier that way?
No, because you still won't have, the only issue I think you're asking about is healthcare. And as I said, it's not about being Canadian, it's about residency. So you don't have healthcare, you need the insurance for the baby. Just like you need travel insurance when you come here. Being a Canadian citizen allows you to pass on Canadian citizenship to child. But if the baby's born here, it's getting it on its own anyway, so it's fine. You will be able to pass on dual citizenship for those of you who are citizens of various other countries. And Canada, it's important to note, does not have a limitation on how many citizenships you can have. So I have a client who essentially bought commercial citizenships all over the world and has been able to pass on about 9 of them to the baby. We worked with 9 lawyers. I had a chart making sure we filled out everything, signed everything, got everything done. It cost him a fortune, but he could afford that. And that's one lucky child, boy. But that's hard work. And the other thing to note is what is different, a big difference between Canada and the US, apart from the cost and the altruistic nature, is the citizenship issue. If your baby's born in the US and has American citizenship, you will have to report to the American tax authorities, the IRS, that child's income always to the IRS. So for many of my clients who have lots of income and concerns about that and trust, that's a big problem. You can, at some point in time, say, denounce the American citizenship, but you cannot do it until the child is 18. And then if you do it at 18, they automatically presume you're doing it for tax avoidance and they won't do it. So Canada does not have that requirement of reporting. And I know for clients in Switzerland, it's a huge problem. The Swiss banks are very upset about that as well. So it's not always a problem for people, but you never know what's going to happen and what, you know, blessings your child may have with income in the future, something to consider.
Yeah.
Another, Sorry, go ahead, Sam.
Cindy, if you're a single parent, that's possible in Canada to be a single parent on the birth certificate with just you as the parent, is that right?
Yes, absolutely. We have lots of single parents. It's amazing. And again, depending on the country in which you live in, if initially you need the surrogate to remain on the birth certificate, we let her know that at the beginning of your journey, because the lawyers will always keep agencies up to date. But we recommend you speak with a lawyer right away. And I'm not saying that because I am a lawyer. And I think the parents on the panel will tell you the information the lawyer gives you is this kind of thing. You may need the surrogate on the birth certificate depending on your country, not Canada, though. And then after you obtain your parentage rights in your country and citizenship for the child, we can go back and amend it in our country. But there are little rules in each province. And so your lawyer will make sure you understand, and also make sure the surrogate understands. Because as you heard, the surrogate has her own lawyer, and that's critical. And we want to tell her if she's considering matching with a parent in a country where she has to be on the birth certificate, then we want her to know that and to have the assurance that it will be changed later. Because, you know, most surrogates are happy to help, but they don't want that legal obligation for the rest of their lives either. And, you know, we don't really see a big problem with that in anywhere. I've never known it to be a problem. The requirements are consistent across the country. Right now, there are two provinces, Alberta and Nova Scotia, that do require a genetic connection for at least one parent. So if you're single and it's not your sperm or egg, those provinces are a problem. In my view, it's unconstitutional because the federal legislation says you don't need genetics to have a baby. It's intention. But I'm not sure, as I said at the beginning, the law is boring for you. It would be really sexy for me to fight those laws in those provinces, but you'd be tied up without a birth certificate for a good 5 years, even if I did it for free. Otherwise, it could cost like $1 million. So sexy for me, but I have to slap myself in the face sometimes and say not in the best interest of the client to fight that. So we're hoping to just lobby it over time.
Thank you so much, Cindy. That's great. It's really, really useful. We'll stay on the line. There'll be some questions coming in, I'm sure, but we're now going to...
Someone asked about legal enforcement.
Yeah.
So most provinces, the legislation about family law talks about the contract for surrogacy and says it is not an enforceable document, but may be used as evidence to show the intention of who is the parent. So what that means is the courts do not want you coming to them, using our time and money to argue over whether your surrogate ate too much tuna with mercury in it, for her to argue you didn't pay the right amount of her loss of income. But if ever there was a surrogate who's suggesting she's not giving you the baby, they absolutely will welcome you in the courtroom and fix that on an emergency basis. We've never had to do that in 40 years because most surrogates will say to you that they have the same fear on the opposite side of the mirror. You're there saying, will she keep my baby? And she's there saying, will they come for their baby? Because she's done. She doesn't want your baby. But to that extent, we would never have a problem. The courts would always rule in the best interests of the child, and that means you. And that's another important factor, actually, because the Canadian government also sees the baby as a Canadian child. And as a Canadian child, our federal government has an obligation and a desire to intervene in a situation where that child's parent is not able to be a parent, which is why our government in 9 days changed the legislation at the beginning of COVID to enable every foreign parent to get into this country for the birth of their baby. It was a Canadian baby who deserved its parents, and intervened in other countries to allow people to get on planes and get here. Australia, as you know, Sam, was a really hard one, but we got everyone here.
Yeah. No,
and now I'm hoping with what's going on in Israel, any parent in Israel with an imminent birth should be able to get to the Canadian embassy and get on one of the planes patriating Canadians out.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Cindy. That's wonderful. We're going to bring in our parent panelists now who've been waiting patiently from around the world. Many of them, know
far more interesting than me.
So we're going to welcome Mark Davidson, who's Australian, Charlie Ty, who's from the UK. We've got Johannes from Germany, and we've got Molly O'Brien, who's an Irish mum. So let me just bring these guys up. Mark's got a particularly interesting journey in that Mark's had surrogacy in not only in the Canada but also in the USA. So he can comment on both of those programs really. I'm going to run through some questions with each of them about sort of their journeys, if you like. Look, Charlie, we might start with you. Can you tell us, hello, nice to see you. Can you tell us a bit about...
Nice to see you again.
Yeah, tell us a bit about how long you were talking about having a family before you jumped in and sort of...
Yeah, so I mean, my husband and I have been together for about 5 or 6 years, but early on in our relationship, we discussed the prospect of having a family. So it was quite key to our relationship going forward. And then life got in the way and we got busy and things. So we didn't actually start actively pursuing our journey until about 2 years before our son was born. And we had COVID in the middle of ours as well, which sort of made things a little bit longer winded. And we're one of the few parents in the world that we can say FedEx were involved in the creation of our child, which is, as Dr. Lebrac was saying, quite an impressive way of managing to get our sperm across to Canada. But it was, so it was, I think, about two and a bit years from the moment we actually pressed go to the arrival of our son.
Okay, that's great. And I mean, was it a hard process for you guys sort of finding an egg donor for us to start with?
We used egg helpers, who Scott spoke earlier, I think. And yes and no. I mean, I think you can get yourself sort of tied up in lots of knots and ask lots of questions and sort of it becomes quite in depth. We wanted to have an egg donor that had similar talents and attributes to my husband and myself, just so that there would be sort of, I'm musical and work in the arts, and my husband is sporty. So we were lucky enough to find an egg donor who matched those sort of attributes. And you know, in the end, actually, she was a lovely person, and she started off being anonymous to us. And then we changed our mind and said, actually, could we meet? And turned out that she was fantastic. But it was complicated insofar as you can keep going, and you can keep going, and there will always be some questions that you don't know the answer to. But then that's the nature of child creation and childbirth. So you sort of at some point just need to take a deep breath and make the plunge, because you know women that are generous enough to be egg donors are going to be special people anyway. So you can't really go wrong.
Yeah, good point. Johannes, welcome. Thank you for coming on today. That's great. What part of Germany do you live in?
Me and my husband and my daughter, we live in Nuremberg. It's a city in Bavaria, just north of Munich.
Yeah, okay. How old were you when you decided you wanted to be a father?
Oh my, like early 20s, like forever. I sort of knew that I always wanted to be a dad. So that's why I was struggling a little bit with my coming out phase, because I figured it's either or, like it can't be both. But then over time you learn, you do research, you can find out that you can be a gay man and become a dad. So for me, it was always a given that this is going to be my path in the future. And luckily my husband thought the same thing. So we started talking about having kids before we actually met on our first date physically. Right. Because then if you already know that it's such an elementary part of your life and your partner doesn't support that, then maybe it's not the right match. So channeling what the surrogate said earlier, it's about like finding out who you have to deal with and basically if your path is aligned in this relationship going forward. So, yeah.
What made you both decide on doing this in Canada?
So I'm more of a research kind of person. I'm a planner. I'm doing the whole thing. So I did my homework. We looked into adoption. We looked into foster care. We looked into surrogacy. Like, what is the best path to really fulfill our dream of becoming a family? And then talking to a lot of people, also here in Germany, about also adoption processes, was pretty clear that we have to go down the route of surrogacy. And then we looked at all of the different models internationally, like may it be Eastern Europe, the US, Canada, all other countries. What spoke to us was the ethics about how the altruistic model, the way the matching works, the way you find the surrogate, the way everybody is supportive, also culturally. We felt so welcome in Canada, and we agreed with the rules they put in place. It spoke to us, and we said, hey, that's the closest to what our own values are. And that's why we said, hey, let's go for Canada.
Great. That's really great answer. Molly, hello, nice to see you again. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Sam. Hey, everybody. Thank you.
Hello. Can you tell us, Molly, what was your medical need for surrogacy? What was going on in your body that made you need this?
Yeah, I suppose a little different than the gay guys have spoken. We thought that IVF would be our answer, as in I thought I would always be able to carry my own child. But for some reason, my body just did not do what I needed it to do. I had multiple miscarriages over multiple years of IVFs. Did IVFs here in Ireland and Dublin, did IVFs in London, did IVFs in Greece, and did IVFs in both Canada and the States. Wow. And had over 10 miscarriages all through IVF pregnancies. So probably more stubborn than I should have been. I should have given up on my own body sooner than I did, but I didn't. So surrogacy was the next kind of route for us after I was like, I can't do this anymore. And like that, very ill-informed at the time, very confused, as with a number of other countries. Ireland, we just didn't and still don't have proper legislation for surrogacy. So even if I had a family member who said they would carry for me, it just meant that in Ireland, I wouldn't have or be recognized as my own kid's mom, which is something that I really wanted to be. And like Johanna spoke, just that whole Canadian model sat right with us. We went to a conference back in 2017 in Dublin where different countries were represented. I know a lot of heterosexual couples go to the Ukraine, but I really wanted a relationship with my surrogate. I really wanted her to be part of our kids' life, part of our families, and thankfully they are. We actually have 2 different surrogates. So that sounds like to people, oh, something must have gone terribly wrong there. It didn't at all. Both circumstantial for both our surrogates, but we have 2 boys who both, Oscar, actually my little boy, turned 1 yesterday, and Elliot is 3, and we have amazing relationships with both of their surrogates. One of our surrogates is based in Alberta and the other one is based in Ontario.
Right. That's amazing. I hadn't realized you had a second one. That's great. Hey,
yeah.
Was it much of a difference doing it in those different provinces in terms of the end part, the birth certificate? Was it?
No, not at all. I mean, Elliot, there was difficulties, as Charlie spoke about. He was a COVID baby, and we actually rocked on up to our flight from Dublin to get into Canada. And I think we were one of those sets of IPs who brought that legislation in, the reunification with a family member who hasn't been born yet, because we actually didn't make our flight the first time. We were sent home with our tail between our legs, and then there was panic. I was that mom who was like, oh, Megan's going to think we're not coming for this baby. We want to. What I would say on that is get somebody like Cindy, get somebody who's a good lawyer who knows, and they literally coach you through every step of the way. It's their bread and butter. It's what they do day to day. You're not meant to be a legal expert, but what you do need is a good lawyer who'll tell you what to do, what comes next, sign here, this is next, you got to get this in order. So you can have your ducks in a row, so to speak, and get on with what you want to do, which is get home to your support network with your baby, as much and all as you like Cindy said, maybe you do want to stay in Canada. We had an amazing time in Canada post-birth, both times around, but you just want to get home. There's a bit of you that just wants to get home with your baby and start living your life back at home.
Molly, a lot of women come to me, after having years of failed IVF and they're older and they worry about having a kid older. I mean, how old were you when you turned to surrogacy?
Yeah, late 30s.
Yeah.
I'm mid 40s now, so yeah. And yeah, like, I mean, I think that was, we were getting pregnant with IVF, so I kind of was stubborn enough to keep going. But like I say, I don't, the age thing doesn't bother me. I don't feel like an older mom. I probably am, but I don't feel that way. And I would just encourage anyone, if that drive, that passion, that will is there, that want to be a mom or a dad, go for it. It is it's amazing. Yes, it's a bumpy road and has its ups and downs, and things don't come into it with this ideal vision of, we're going to have transfer there, I'm going to meet a surrogate here. Things take longer than you expect them to. There will be bumps in the road, but it is your happy ending. Yeah. Like Johanna spoke earlier, and we went down the route of adoption as well, and it was just hard. And in this country, they said, adoption is a service for children, and it just appeared at every hurdle and every step of the way that it wasn't a service for children. I'm like, if it was a service for children, you would speed this up and make it easier than it is. And from the moment we went to our first surrogacy conference on surrogacy, the vibe was just so much different. This air of positivity and a community that is so full of love. And I'm just really happy to be part of that community. You'll meet some amazing IPs along your way. You'll meet some amazing surrogates along your way. And it is your pathway to parenthood, in my opinion, the best way. And yeah, I'm so happy for what the surrogates have done for us, because we enter this world as IPs into a world where we need something. So that's why I ended up knowing so much about surrogacy. When you think of surrogates who like enter this world to kind of go, yeah, I could do something really nice here. I want to give back to the world. I want to do that. We come at it from totally different angles, and it just amazes me and makes me gobsmacked day after day that there's so many beautiful, amazing women out there who are like, I want to make this world a better place by helping another family become a family.
No, that's great. Thanks, Molly. Mark, let's turn to you. So you're an Australian living in Ireland. I think I met you when you were in Australia, living in Australia.
Brisbane 2016.
Yeah, that's right. So tell us, you've actually got also an interesting journey, because you had the first child in USA, and then you had embryos left over in the USA, and I think then you had to find a surrogate. And what made you change to Canada for your second journey?
Cost was a factor. There's 5 years between our first birth and second birth, and the cost, it seemed like it almost doubled in the US from about 5 years ago. Canada, and it was important for us to have our names on the birth certificate, and Canada provided that as an opportunity as well. So we decided to go with Canada second time around.
Yeah, great. And how long did it take you to match with a surrogate in Canada?
The agency called it a match. We signed up with them in November 21. They called it a match. We could debate that for a while, but the real match with our surrogate ended up being in February 2022, and we did a transfer in October 2022 and birth in July 2023.
Yeah, so that's not bad in Canadian terms, I suppose, compared to what some people go through wait times. Yeah. What was different about the Canadian experience as opposed to doing it in the USA for you guys?
Honestly, it just felt so much smoother and easier. And America is very, I guess you call it transactional, but when you're spending a number of weeks after birth or even pre-birth, culturally it just seemed to align way more with Australia and Ireland, and it was way more relaxed. Everything was easy. The health system was easy. The legal system was easy, and it wasn't slower than America. It was about the same timelines as America for us. but it felt more like at home. Canada just felt like a second home to us.
Yeah, okay. And when did you actually get to meet your Canadian surrogate face to face?
We met her face to face 3 weeks before the birth. And in our first journey, we flew to America and met our surrogate. And this time we didn't do that. And 3 weeks before our birth of Hudson, we flew over and met Megan, and feel like we've been adopted into a Canadian family now.
Yeah, I met Megan, of course, and she's lovely. But I mean,
Yeah.
Was that weird though, not having met her face to face before? How does that work when you're doing it all on a Zoom like this? Does it work okay?
Yeah, it worked fine. It just is, Megan, she's just such a relaxed, positive person, and yeah, there was no complications. We really did want to get over there and see it, but because you've already got a child and work and this, it just was hard to make it happen. And we spoke with Megan about that at the beginning, and she was more than okay with it. And so that was part of our matching process, was making sure that both parties were aware that we might not be able to do a face-to-face introduction before we get there.
Yeah. Johannes, what about you guys? Did you meet your surrogate at the start end, or was it all done online?
So for us, unfortunately, it was completely during COVID. So there was no conversation to be had. Do we meet in person? We met her 1 day prior to the birth. It was pure coincidence. I think the baby heard us go into the hospital room saying, "Hey, we're here. Finally, we meet you for the first time. We've been waiting for this moment for quite some time." And then the next morning, we got the call from the doctor, "You got to come back." And then there was our daughter.
Yeah, amazing. And Charlie, for you, was it the same for you?
No, we managed to get across for the 20-week scan. We were very lucky. Our surrogate was based in Nova Scotia, in Halifax, Nova Scotia, or Truro, Nova Scotia was near Halifax, and we're based in London. And there's a daily flight from London Heathrow to Halifax, and it's for about 5-6 hour flight. So it's not hugely a hugely long flight. So we actually managed to get across 3 or 4 times throughout the pregnancy, which worked for us, and it was great. I mean, we didn't meet until the 20-week scan, so we were quite far down the journey. But all the chatting before that had been online, on Zoom, on video calls, and that's that works because that's the way that it has to be. Everyone else has said that that's how they establish their relationships, and there's no expectation for you to be there the whole time. I think you'd probably get in the way if you are, to be quite frank, if you're there too much. Because the surrogate needs to get on with her life and get on with what she's doing while she's busy growing your child for you. So yeah, it's being there in person is really, really lovely, but it's not a necessity. It's a really lovely bonus if it works.
Yeah. And Charlie, did your first embryo transfer work, or did you require a few transfers?
So we had 2 surrogates. Our first journey was with one surrogate who had been with another couple prior to us, and she had tried to get pregnant for them, and had 2 failed transfers with them. And then she came to us, and she had 2 failed transfers with us. And by that stage, she was quite emotionally drained from the whole process, which is entirely understandable. And so she said she needed to bow out, which we obviously completely supported her in doing. So then we were rematched with our surrogate that ended up carrying our son for us. And that was the first transfer was a success, and it happened without any hiccups. So we were lucky in that respect.
Yeah, great. Molly, what about you guys? Did you need a number of transfers to have success?
Yes, we did. In fact, on our first baby, we had 3 failed transfers, and I know a lot of people's recommendation is to change surrogate. We didn't change surrogate. We actually changed IVF clinics and created a different batch of embryos, and were successful then. And on our second journey with Oscar, our second surrogate, I got conscious, it sounds really weird. I know their names and know them really well, but I'm like, I don't know, do I want to say them here? So on our second journey with our second surrogate, it was a first time transfer success. So yeah, highs and lows.
Okay. And were you able to be in the room for the birth?
Yes, for Elliot's birth during COVID, we got to Canada quite early, quarantined for 2 weeks, had a few sneaky meetups with our surrogate from a distance and stuff. And then, yeah, she actually is from a very small country town in Alberta. So we were like celebrities in the hospital. Well, they like surrogacy birth. Oh my God, this is so exciting. And we had like the whole wing of the hospital to ourselves. Again, highs and lows. Our second journey, we again left what we thought was in perfect time at week 37 for Oscar's birth, and we had a delayed flight in Dublin. We sat on the runway in Dublin for 6 hours, and when we landed in Toronto, Hayley sent a voice note to say, "Don't panic, I'm in labor." So we actually missed Oscar's birth. He was born as we sat on a connecting flight, again delayed from Toronto to Ottawa. That flight was delayed, and we watched our son being born from the airplane and went straight to the hospital in an Uber, because our hire car, baby car seats, everything was a nightmare. But you know what? He was happy and healthy, and he couldn't have been in safer, better hands than with Hayley. So all's well that ends.
Yeah, those of you who are doing national surrogacy, this will happen to about a quarter of you. You will miss the birth. It just happens. It's just sometimes babies come early, flights get delayed. It's very common. Don't freak out. If as Molly says, they're in good hands. If you're a day or two late, it's not the end of the world. As you all know, you're in charge once the baby's discharged from hospital. Molly, did you worry about bonding with your child? Did you think, oh my God, is my child gonna
No, I didn't. And then I kind of questioned that afterwards. And we just wanted babies for so long. We had so many years of heartache and disappointment. My only thing was I was literally like, is he ours? Is this, are we allowed to go? Can we leave here with this little tiny human? It just was, no problem bonding. And on either occasion. And both had like beautiful relationships with our surrogates, and we're like conscious of like, oh, do you want to cut the cord? Do you want to hold him a little more? Can I take him? They're like, he's all yours now. You take him. I'm done. My work here is done.
Johannes, for you and your partner, did you both want to provide sperm? Was there an argument about who'd be the sperm donor?
No, so we did. We are planning to do something like Dr. Liebrek alluded to earlier. So we had the split cycle where we actually half of the eggs were for me and half of the eggs for my husband, and we want to be both. That's it eventually.
Okay, great. With the same egg donor?
So yeah, same egg donor. We still have embryos left. We after 3 months we found out like who the biological dad is, and now we take my husband's eggs that are left for our second journey. We are just kicking off right now. Yeah,
okay. And Charlie, what about you guys? Did you care who was going to be the sperm donor?
No, I mean, much like Johannes, we split our egg donations that we collected between me and my husband, and half were using my sperm, half were using my husband's, and then we told Dr. Liberac to use the strongest embryo that he thought was going to be most successful, and transfer that one, which he did do. And like Johannes, we didn't know which embryo it was until fairly recently. In fact, there was Sarah, our surrogate, was often asked in the street whether she knew whether she was going to have a boy or a girl. And people who didn't know she was on a surrogacy journey, and she would often turn around and say, "No, I don't know if I'm going to boy or a girl. In fact, I don't even know who the father is," which would often get quite a surprising reaction. So we and then like Johanna said as well, we will use the embryos from the other father for the next journey, having had the same egg donor.
Right. How long did it take you to come home to the UK after the birth?
Well, we were incredibly lucky. Well, lucky in some ways and unlucky in other ways, in that our son was born just before Christmas, on the 14th of December, and we had booked a return flight for Christmas Eve. He was slightly late being born, just a flexible flight to come back with, because we had to put a date somewhere in the diary. And our Nova Scotian lawyer had put in an application for our birth certificate and put a covering letter in on top, saying these guys need to get back to the UK for Christmas. Please, could you expedite this as much as possible? And we were incredibly lucky that the Canadian system is so full of lovely, friendly people that whoever opened the envelope that morning saw it and said, yeah, absolutely. And so we got a birth certificate back within about 3 days, which I think is more or less unheard of. And then the passport was back within 2 days, which is again more or less unheard of. We made a point of thanking the passport control people in Nova Scotia and saying what amazing service they did, which they were incredibly grateful for, because they were constantly told that all they were doing was a rubbish job. So the fact that they've been so quick, they were very grateful. And I said, well, come to the UK, then you'll see how bad the service is. So we actually got to leave Canada 10 days after our son was born, which was great because we managed to get back to the UK in time for Christmas, and we managed to surprise my parents with knocking on their front door on Christmas morning. The sad part was that we would have loved to have spent more time with our surrogate and given her the opportunity to have a little bit more time with our son. That said, we're still in touch with our surrogate, and she's been over to visit us a good few times in the UK, and we will go and visit her in Canada as well. And that's a relationship that we're really, really keen to maintain. So we ultimately we haven't lost out.
Yeah. Johannes, you're German. The German government doesn't really support surrogacy, as you know. Does that make it hard for you in terms of getting German ID documents for your child?
Yes and no. So I think rather than the legal obstacles, it's more the cultural ones, because in Germany, even within Europe, we have the most antiquated laws when it comes to embryo creation and the whole thing. So even though our laws are pretty flexible now, and there's a process in place of how it should be to obtain the documents, it took us more than a year to get actually a birth certificate for our daughter. And linked to the birth certificate is all of the financial support, like when you lose out on your wages because somebody's staying home, or like the child benefits. Like once you have a kid, usually you get a monthly payment. All of this is linked to the German birth certificate, which we couldn't get, even though Germany as a country recognizes Canadian law, which was a big plus for us to choose Canada. So once you get a birth certificate in Canada, the German government has to implement the same in Germany, with both of the men on the birth certificate. But then the process only works as well as the people to execute it. And culturally, we also live in an area that's maybe not the most progressive, I would say.
Yeah.
So we ended up with a woman who was a little bit taken aback of surrogacy. We needed to explain the whole thing to her. She didn't agree with it. I tried to explain to her that it doesn't really matter so much if she personally agrees with it, as there's like rules in place. But it took us, it took also our German lawyer to contact her and the authorities a few times to actually get things set up. And that's why I would also just reemphasize what we heard before. Even though you can do it on your own, you're not the legal expert. Pay someone to do this for you. Take this headache off your plate, because it's definitely a good investment.
Yeah, sure. A question's come in about sort of costs in Canada, and as many of you know, the cost can vary a lot depending on how early you have success. Did any of you ever add up what you spent in the Canadian journey thing?
Yeah. I think ours was about 85,000. I thought it was more, but it was about 85,000. But we did have embryos already created.
And that was
Canadian
dollars?
Yeah, sorry, 85,000 euros.
Euros, right.
Euros, yeah. We had embryos already created, but we did fly our surrogate down to San Diego a couple of times. So the costs can vary depending on surrogate's location, where your fertility clinic and all that is as well. So, but we paid 85,000 euros.
Okay, that's useful. Yeah, I had forgotten to tell people that, your embryos were actually in the USA, so your surrogate had to fly down there for the transfer, didn't she? Yeah. And that is something that you guys might need or decide you want to do, have embryos somewhere else. The surrogate will usually not be in the same city as where your embryos are, so you will have to budget for costs for her travel. In many cases, a number of times if you need a number of transfers, and that can't add up. I think the surrogate gets to travel with a partner, with a friend to appointments too, doesn't she?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right,
I think
that's
so.
great. Thank you so much, everybody, for your time. It's been great to hear everybody's stories. Really interesting, especially having people from so many different countries sharing their experiences. Yeah, I think the audience has loved it. So thank you, guys. I'm gonna wrap up with you guys now. We'll do one last talk now from a Canadian psychologist who's going to talk about that kind of thing. You guys maybe stay on the line for a bit in case questions come in for the Q&A tab for you to answer as well. But it's wonderful to hear so many successful stories and so much perseverance. I know we had a long time doing it for ourselves, but I know for some of you guys it's taken a while too, especially for you, Molly. Yeah.
It's worth it though. It's worth it. Yeah. And you will
Absolutely.
get there.
Absolutely.
So best of luck to everyone
Yeah.
on their journey. Keep the faith.
Yeah, thanks, Molly. That's great. All right. Thanks, guys. I'm now introducing Jan Silverman to you all. Jan is, as I said, a psychologist based in Canada who does a lot of the assessments of suitability for surrogates and intending parents, and this is a really important area we don't spend enough time on. Jan, welcome. Thanks so much for coming in on this for us. We've got lots of people who've joined today. How long have you worked in the area for?
I've worked in the area for 32 years.
Wow.
Best career move I ever made.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, no doubt.
You must have seen everything in that time. My gosh, you must have seen all types.
You know, it's definitely seeing all types, but it's also watching the evolution of the field that has been so fascinating. And listening to this panel has been extraordinary because it's reflected so much, so many changes and so many people that now that we understand that it really takes a team to make this work as well as I believe it now does work. So I feel pretty honored to be a part of this group.
Yeah, that's great, Dan. Tell us a bit about what you do as a professional. Give people some insight into that.
Of what I do, is that what you said? Your voice dropped for the moment.
Yeah, what you do as a professional in the field, what your role is.
Okay. So I'm based in Create and worked with Dr. Liebrack for, don't tell him, also 32 years. And we are responsible. Everybody that in the Canadian system has to go through what we call an assessment. That means the donors, the surrogates, and the intended parents. Now, when we see intended parents, we don't call it an assessment as much as we call it a psychoeducational discussion. And in that psychoeducational discussion, we want to help them navigate this unusual, fascinating, sometimes challenging path for them. So a little bit of preparation. We want to make sure that they're stable. We want to discuss with them a little bit about what the path is going to entail, you know, some of the pitfalls perhaps. And then, because I truly believe that when people start on this path, that if they can keep themselves together, they are going to wind up, as so many of your participants have talked about, they are going to wind up with their child. So my favorite part at the end of what I talk about, it's helping them to prepare for later when they're going to actually be talking to their children or their child or their children about their experience. And I'm going to get back to that, I hope, in a moment. But more importantly, or equally importantly, is that we do social assessments on the donors and on the surrogates. And in those assessments, we speak thoroughly. We have a structured interview, and we spend a lot of time discussing with the donors and more extensively with the surrogates about what is going to be happening, what will this entail, what should they expect. And we are really trying to eke out what issues they have. We discuss with them mental health issues. We talk thoroughly about their backgrounds. And I'm going to tell you, and if you hear it in my accent, I'm originally from New York City. So in case you're wondering where the accent came from, but I've been in Canada a long time. And one of the things that I'm often struck with is the openness and honesty of many, many, many of our surrogates and donors. So when we talk to them about what are their mental health issues, how clearly they are about discussing it. Now, obviously, if there are serious mental health issues, obviously, please know they're out. We are not going to, include a surrogate that has extensive psychological issues. So, schizophrenia, bipolar disorders, obviously, no. But, they are like we are. And especially, I will suggest in the last few years, we have seen a huge increase in people talking about issues like anxiety. And that comes up a lot. And I'm mentioning this because we are not perfect human beings at all. But we have coping strategies. What do you call anxiety? So if someone will, and I'm mentioning this because I don't want you to look at profiles. I don't want people to look at profiles and go, oh, she said she has some anxiety. Because what our job is to explore, what does anxiety mean? How does it manifest? Now, if they just say, I'm a little nervous that I'm going to get sick or that I'm going to catch COVID, like that's very different than being unable to leave their home ever. So I think that we try to determine the levels, what is going on, but being realistic about it. Because as I said, we all bring something to our own personal situations. But I always state the overwhelming majority of our surrogates and our donors are incredibly nice, caring, kind people that truly do want to help. So
can you
go
talk
ahead.
with
I think you were going to say something.
I was just going to ask one question. I mean, if I was a single surrogate, does that make it harder for me in terms of support networks to go through the journey?
I would suggest no. A lot of that, because again, thank you for mentioning that, because we also do look at their support networks, and that's a very important aspect of our evaluation. We want to know what's out there. And do I think that it makes it harder? No, because this is where the selection of your agency can be really important as well. There is a network of surrogates. There is a beautiful sisterhood, so to speak, where they rely on each other. A couple of weeks ago, I was visiting a surrogate that was coming in for a transfer, just because I talked to her on the phone and through Skype, and it was so exciting to be able to meet her face to face. And also in the room was another surrogate that lived about an hour and a half away that had come into town to just kind of sit with her and hang out with her. And you hear this repeated so often. So there are supports provided. And I will also suggest that in most counselors, many counselors, and definitely for myself, that I'm there for the surrogates as well, that they know that there's an availability, that if they want to talk through an issue or kind of discuss something, that there's an availability of someone to spend time with them and share or talk an issue through or hold a hand, either virtually or physically.
And Jen, do surrogacy providers in Canada have people like you on staff, or is it, or you basically independent operators?
Well, I will say that is truly one of the unique things about the Create Clinic is that we have, I have a department, we have 3-4 counselors that are embedded in the clinic. That's a little bit unique. Most clinics do not have them embedded. They have lists, so there are wonderful counselors, psychologists that are available through other clinics as well, but we're right there embedded in the system, which, as I said, you know, speaks to Dr. Lieberach and his valuing of making a complete team, you know, a full clinic. It's quite an operation there.
Yeah, sure.
Everything is there at Create.
When it comes to the matching process with when an intended parent's introduced to a surrogate, what sort of red flags? I know lots of intended parents are at this stage feeling a little bit desperate and thinking they'll never match, but I know it's also important they do match with the right sort of person. What kind of red flags should people be looking out for in that matching process?
Good question. You know, I often, and I think I've spoken to some of your panelists before, I have my three-legged stool that I talk to the people that I'm speaking with. And my first thing when I think about what do you need, what are red flags? You have to first of all find a surrogate that you respect and that respects you. It has to be a mutual relationship based on respect. And I think that's hugely important. She is not a hired uterus, and you are not Mr. and Mr. Moneybags, right? There has to be a sense of, are our values matched? Do we feel that we're on the same page? And again, in our assessments, we will explore some of those areas of value-based thinking. Like, do we have the same views around termination if there was to be an anomaly? Do we have the same ideas about what do we see as a birth plan? What kind of involvement do we want at the birth process? But further to that, and I get all my best lines from my surrogates, to be perfectly honest. They said, yeah, Jan, right? Yeah, respect. They said it's more than that. The intended parent must trust the surrogate, no matter where you are. You're somewhere out there and the surrogate is somewhere in Canada. You know, you are not there. You cannot stop at the door every morning and say, did you remember to take your vitamins? Or vitamins, I guess some of you guys say. Right? So there has to be that sense of trust. You have to trust that when she says that she does not drink, does not smoke, does not use drugs, that she really does it. Now, again, they are screened for those things, but you have to feel that internal trust. So you don't feel it, that's not the right person for you. But I will suggest that the biggest thing for me is communication. And to me, it's communication. My biggest red flag is always going to be when I hear someone saying, we're not talking. I'm not comfortable discussing. I didn't really feel that they wanted to hear. It has to be there. Now, different patterns. I have definitely had surrogates that'll say that, oh, we talk 5 times a day. We're always texting each other. And then I'll have other people go, oh my God, I don't have time to talk to my partner 5 times a day, much less the surrogate. And that's fine. But you have to find a communication strategy that's consistent with what the surrogate wants and needs. If she needs that regular, good morning, did you sleep well, a quick text, go for it. I am an incredibly strong believer in visual communication. And I believe that you've talked about that earlier as well. I think that it is crucial that you arrange, not every day, not even every week, but I think you need to have Skype calls or Zoom calls or whatever. I want you to get to know the face of your surrogate. I want you to be able to look at her and go, gee, she looks a little stressed or a little tired. I want her to know your face. I want her to be able to look at you and say, something's going on there. What's going on? I also want you, as intended parents, to watch your bump growing. I want you to be able to have her stand up and say, what's going on there now? I just think that it's important that you create that relationship, because surrogacy is about relationship building. And again, we each define it in a different way. You just want to make sure that you and the surrogate kind of are on a similar page. You may not be on the exact same line, but you want to be on the same page. And I want to also add, because again, New Yorkers talk too much. But I also want to add my big line always, and another little flag, is never, ever make a promise to a surrogate that you cannot keep. I cannot stress that enough. They put their hearts and souls into this. The intended parents become crucially important to the surrogate. If you say something to her and don't follow through, it hurts. So I heard you people speaking earlier about whether you come and visit, whether you can get to Canada and see them. Fantastic if you can, but they don't necessarily expect that, right? But if you say you are going to come, then you have to come, or else it's really, really disappointing. I always say better to surprise than to disappoint. So no promises that you can't keep. And that's also going to be around that big topic of what will the relationship be like afterwards. I'm going to suggest you don't know. When you start on your journey, you are definitely not in a position to determine what it's going to look like after the baby is born. So again, I try to create a sense of what I call realistic expectations. It is doubtful that you, as intended parents, are going to speak to your surrogate every single day for the rest of your lives. Very doubtful that it's going to happen. But if the journey goes well, then the hope is that you are going to maintain some communication even through the years. I have a client who has a single man, and his daughter is turning 17. And he said at least 3 times a year, he said, how can I ever celebrate my daughter's birthday without being in touch with the surrogate that gave her to me? And then he said, and then of course at Christmas time, and then he said, and if there's an amazing event, I will still be in touch and let her know, oh, she just won a gymnastics competition or something that's been really special. But again, always keep in mind that just as you are people, doing it for a very incredible reason, so are the surrogates and so are the egg donors doing it for an incredible reason. And always remember that they are human beings.
Yeah, no, that's such wise words, Jan. I think you're right. I try and tell people that a lot, but I can't put it as well as you can. That's great. Being able to express it so well. Have you seen much, I suppose, change in the type of women who come forward as surrogates in the last few decades?
Oh, it's weird to think of decades. Yikes. I think that as it becomes, well, yes and no. I mean, I think that there's more of it going on. Obviously, it's become more out there in Canada. I think there's a greater awareness of it. I mean, I find the motivations are a little bit, they're more, well, let me just talk about what motivates them, you know, what they will talk about. And I'm sure you've heard that from your surrogates earlier. But what I often hear is this sense that surrogates will talk about that I'll never be a doctor, I'll never be a lawyer, I'll never be a teacher, but this is something that I can do. This is my wow moment. This is when I can really make a difference in the life of somebody else. And I think we often underestimate how important it is for all of us, not just surrogates, but all of us to have wow moments. And I think that that's quite remarkable to watch a woman come in and say, I really want to do something to help somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I've seen kind of even greater over the years is that sense of, yeah, what can we do to help? And if this reflects a society that's going to start being more considerate and thoughtful of one another, then I say 2 thumbs up for that.
Yeah.
But also, you know, just to be honest as well, is a little bit more savvy. You know, there are more surrogates, and I will also suggest that you have to recognize that some of them go in with expectations or knowledge from, oh, I have all kinds of friends that have also done this, so I have this and I want this, and so I'm going to stress again, as I heard other people stress, that's where the lawyer fits in. That's why finding a good lawyer, negotiating a fair and equitable legal agreement, which I know Cindy would have talked about, is so crucial. Because at the end of the day, they want to help you, but you want to walk out with a baby and you want to feel as though it's been honest and open, and that it's win-win at the end.
Right. Jan, we've run out of time. I could talk to you for hours.
I know.
That's great. That's great. I hope to see you in person at one of our events in the future. We'll try and make it happen, I'm sure.
I really do too.
Wonderful.
And just best of luck. Can I say one last thing? I know you ran out of things, because my one big strategy that I always talk about is to create a narrative of your story. And I don't know if anyone talked about that, but for all those intended parents that are still online, start recording, start taking a few pictures, start journaling, because someday you are going to tell your child of the amazing journey that you took to make them your child.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I mean, those stories are really important, and we certainly put together a storybook with pictures for our kids and wrote down a lot of notes at the time, and it's great. And they had something to refer to throughout their life, from when they're young onwards, with pictures of their donor and their surrogate and all the people involved. So it's a great tip. All right. Thank you so much, Jan. Glad to have you on.
Thank you.
It's great. All right. Everybody, we've run out of time. It's been great to have so many people here.